like to thank everybody for coming to the Wednesday meeting. We'll call it to order. Wednesday, May 6th. We'll start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Lisa.
Mr. Begarow.
Here.
Mr. Boggs. Ms. Butler.
Here.
Mr. Browring.
Here.
Mr. Davis.
Here.
Ms. Rogers.
Here.
Mr. Truax.
Here. Under old business, we have still the withdrawal applicant of application number ZON-18-004.
That's been formally withdrawn.
Withdrawn, okay. So that's withdrawn. So moving on down to new business. We have the rezoning application of ZON-19-003 revised plan. Is that? Jack?
Thank you, sir. Like I said, this is ZON 19003. The applicant here is Grand Communities LLC. They are requesting approval of an amendment of a preliminary plan for the 183 lot plan development district named Sage Point, pursuant to section 1255.19 of the Task Code. So take a look, here is an area map with the property in question outlined in yellow. You've got Cleveland Road to the south and Summit Road to the west. So a little bit about the property. It's 84 acres. There's two frontages on the property. There are some existing tree lines and tree stands on the property. If you look here, you can get a closer look at the existing conditions of the lot, along with the two frontages and the existing vegetation. A little bit of zoning backstory. It was considered for development 3 times previously. However, all these proposals were not accepted by City Council. The proposal this time is to develop the property into a 183 lot planned residential development named Sage Point. And the items in red have changed from the previously approved plan that was recommended for denial by the Planning and Zoning Commission on November 6, 2019. So here is the old layout. And here's the new layout. You can see just a couple things off the bat. They've removed the 10-acre dedication to the school and changed the emergency access into a full access. Removed these long eyebrow streets here and turned them into full cul-de-sacs. Just a quick summary. Home sites, there's 183 lots, density of 2.17 units per acre. Acreage in residential lots is 31.75. Open space is at 38.33 acres. And they did remove that 10-acre dedication to the Licking Heights School District. Minimum lot sizes are up here. You can see they average from 58 feet width to 105 feet length, and for the cul-de-sacs, and minimum standard lot sizes of 58 feet in width by 120 feet length. Minimum setbacks are 25 on the front, 8 feet on each side for 16 feet total, and 20 in the rear. Here's a typical lot layout that the applicant provided. Access is one boulevard-style entrance onto Sage Point Avenue from Summit Road, and an emergency access onto Cleveland Road has been turned into a full access in main Burdock Drive, and the applicant removed these stub streets to the north and south. Excuse me, I believe that was an old one. Access points are located here, outlined in red. Signage, so there's going to be one subdivision identification sign at the entrance on Sage Point Avenue, hanging sign suspended from a wood pergola with landscaping in the median. However, in the submittal, the applicant included concept signage, and that concept signage does meet code with we've added a possible modification to have the applicant comply with section 129509B8 for when the permanent design is settled and provided. So here is a look at the proposed entrance signage. Landscaping, the street trees are at every 30 feet. There's 6 species proposed. The existing tree lines are to be preserved, and all lots have been moved out of the tree preservation zone. 80 trees are proposed to be removed, with 228 replacements required. 183 of these replacements are going as 1 tree per lot. And they moved the 6 to 7 foot mounding from the west to the west side from Summit Road. Before it was on the east of the detention basin, in between the detention basins and the houses. Now it's on the other side, in between the road and the basin. And they still left the asphalt paths into the reserve areas and included a 36 by 40 foot tot lot. So here's a illustrative plan of the landscaping. See, they've got street trees at 30 feet, paths going into the reserve areas with the tot lot up here in the north reserve, various other paths going into the reserve areas. So, planning and zoning staff comments. This was recommended for denial by the Planning and Zoning Commission on November 6, 2020. Council tabled that application, and the applicant submitted these revised plans for this hearing. So following another recommendation by the commission, the application will return to City Council. Attached to the staff report is a list of staff comments. Comments which have been resolved are struck through. Remaining comments are left as they were, and any additional comments aren't read. And all of our original staff comments have been addressed, except for the entry signage, which was labeled as concept, but with the possible modification, we should be able to address this. Here's a quick summary of changes from the plan that was recommended for denial in November of 2019. They moved the landscape mounding from the east side of the retention basins to the west and are no longer requesting a divergence for that. They revised the street tree spacing from 50 feet to 30 feet and are no longer requesting a divergence. They enlarged stormwater management facilities to account for previous inaccuracies in design calculations done by previous development to assist in alleviating the current drainage issues. Eliminated the 2 eyebrow streets, and they are now full cul-de-sacs, and they are no longer requesting a divergence. They increased the cul-de-sac radii to 48 feet minimum as required by the fire department. Removed the stub streets to the north and south, and all lots have been removed out of the 25-foot tree protection zone, and they provided language for that. They also removed the 10-acre dedication to Licking Heights Schools. The emergency access is now full access onto Cleveland Road. Increased common space to 45.43%, and 173 of those 183 lots now abut common open space. And they have added that they were going to comply with the residential architectural standards. 87% of the residential architectural standards. So here are the comments from other departments and agencies. The Public Service Director indicated it appears the developer has addressed all previous comments satisfactorily. Any other details can be worked out in the engineering design and review process. And also added that the donated roadway improvement fund shall be applicable to the area of influence as indicated in the approved traffic impact study, excuse me. City engineer said that all other details will be reviewed in the construction plans process. The West Licking Joint Fire District had the question, is the timeline for the start of phase 3 known? And that should the subdivision not end up being finished past phase 2, the developer shall be required to install an emergency access road either off of Cleveland Road or Summit Road. We did receive a citizen comments from Destiny Coleman at 6335 Summit Road, which is attached to the staff report, and received a further letter after the staff report had been sent out from Jerica Zuckerman, and those reports have been placed on your dais. Surrounding characteristics, to the north we have it zoned rural residential, and it's currently vacant. To the east we have it zoned manufactured home residential and medium low density residential. The manufactured home is the Summit Ridge Estates Mobile Home Park, and the R87 is various single family homes. To the south we have it zoned R87 medium low density residential, which is single family homes, and also M1 light manufacturing, which is Ohio Steel. To the west, we have Planned Development District, which is the Glenbrook subdivision, and R20, which is other various single-family homes. So should the Planning and Zoning Commission choose to approve the applicant's request, the following modifications may be considered. 1, being the applicant shall address all comments from Planning and Zoning staff, the city engineer, Public Service Director, and the West Licking Joint Fire District. And 2, any subdivision identification signs shall comply with section 1295-09B8 of the Pataskala Code. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Any questions? Start down here with, let's go with Ann first.
Not yet.
Charlotte?
Not right now.
Emma?
The money from that they contributed to the traffic impact study, what kind of, what would that go toward?
Intersection improvements along Summit, so what is that? Havens Corners, I believe, to the north.
Yeah.
And then Summit, so that's the area of influence
Right.
with the traffic study. So any money donated as part of this project will go to improvements along that corridor.
Would that include, like, if it gets to the point in the future, stoplights?
Potentially, if those are appropriate, I don't know that they are,
Sure.
because there's certain justifications they have to meet. So at this time, I think it would be at the discretion of the city manager, their designee, to determine what the appropriate improvements are.
Mhm.
Currently, we're working on an analysis of our intersection to see what needs to be approved. So more than likely, that money will go towards making those identified improvements.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
One question on this, since we've looked at this so many different times,
Mhm.
there's been so many iterations of it. So it was a rezoning application.
Correct.
What was it originally zoned as?
R87, correct.
Okay, and that's what, so they're no longer asking for it to be changed from R87.
They are. It'll be R87 to a planned development district. But since they went through the preliminary development plan process and there was a recommendation from Planning and Zoning Commission, it went up to council. It was tabled where council suggested they come back and tweak the plan. Therefore, it's an amendment now of a preliminary development plan that's been through the process. So essentially, the rezoning request is exactly the same. R87 to planned development district.
Okay, so, and pretty much everything that they have now is falling into R87.
It'll fall into the criteria established per code and per the comprehensive plan in terms of density.
Okay,
So the R87 standards in terms of setbacks, lot size are not applicable to this.
okay, so that, because now it's, I thought it used to be a lot more than 6, or it was 8 feet between, and they were at 5. So now they're complying with everything that they need to.
In
They're
the
not
code.
asking for any kind of divergences.
That's
or
correct.
anything.
That's correct.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Mhm.
Frank?
Yeah, two questions. You mentioned the donations for the street or improvements would be down on Summit Road. Was there any plans for doing anything to Cleveland Avenue as well?
That would be part of the sphere of influence from along Summit. So at this time, I don't believe so along Cleveland. I can't guarantee it, but that would be at the discretion of the city administrator, their designee. So I'm assuming that will come down to the public service director to allocate those funds.
And then the second one, you had mentioned they were adhering to 87% of the residential architectural standards.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what they're not adhering to on the standards?
Since Sage Point came in prior to the adoption of standards, they are under no obligation to adhere to those.
Okay.
So they voluntarily said, here's what we're willing to adhere to. I believe it's side-loaded garages, was one of those. The garage, being set 4 feet back from the front of the house. Things along, the entire list I don't have offhand, but it's just a few related to garage mostly, as I recall.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, the one question that I had was, the parcels, it stated on the street that it would be no later than the 101st lot street would be, the street would be built, but the fire department stated that it should be after phase 2, but I think if the math's done right, 101 comes after phase 2. Am I correct there, or am I incorrect there? I just want to make sure which one.
Go to the slide that addresses
The fire department comment?
that. So the timeline for the start of phase 3, and then the subdivision, so, and we can work this out with the
That's
fire
fine.
district to ensure that applicable emergency access is provided. So that might be working with the applicant and fire district to make sure that everything is met.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because I think 101 comes after phase 2, or is into phase 3, if you know, on the parcels. So other than that, that's all I have. Before we get going, I kind of jumped a little ahead. I want to go over the social distancing rules for the people out in the waiting area. And I wanted to read the procedures that we'll be following here at this meeting. Once the application is called by the chairperson, the staff presentation will be given. Following the presentation, the applicant or applicant's representative will be called to the podium. The applicant or applicant's representatives will be sworn in, state their name and address for the record. The applicant and or applicant's representative will explain their application and answer questions for the planning and zoning. The applicant or applicant's representation must provide a speaker request form in order to comment. Number 3, once the applicant or applicant's representation is spoken, there will be an opportunity for public comment. The public will be called into the room one at a time based upon a submitted speaker request form. The public must remain in the lobby, either upstairs or downstairs, until their name is called. The member of the public will be sworn in and state their name and address for the record. The member of the public will provide comment on the application and answer questions from the Planning and Zoning Commission. After the member of the public has commented, they must return to the lobby. The public must provide a speaker request form in order to comment. Number 4, following the public comment, the applicant or applicant's representative may address any comments made from the public and answer questions from the Planning and Zoning Commission. The public may not provide additional comments unless the Planning and Zoning Commission has questions for a specific member of the public. Following the conclusion of the comments from the public, the applicant or applicant's representative, the Planning and Zoning Commission may deliberate on the application and ask questions of the staff. Planning and Zoning Commission will call the vote on the application. A majority of Planning and Zoning Commission members must vote on the affirmative for the application to be approved.
And I would also comment that the hearing tonight is being live streamed via the City of Pataska's Facebook page, and also the agendas, speaker request forms, and these rules are in the hallway.
And where are those at in the hallway? Just are they on a table or where?
They're at a table across from the vending machine.
Okay, so they are on a table across from the vending machine. We encourage anybody and everybody to please grab those so that they can understand the procedures. And I apologize, I should have read that at the beginning, not now. All right, I do have, moving on, I have a speaker request form from the applicant, Ms. Connie Kleeman. Please state your name and address, please.
Sure, Connie Klima, P.O. Box 991, Pataskla, Ohio.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear that the testimony that you will give in this matter will be the whole truth as you shall answer unto God?
I do. Well, I've been here to talk about this development before, and we've gone through some different scenarios. When we were here last, we had made a lot of changes. We still had 4 or 5 divergences. We wanted to proceed with that to council. When we got to council, we started talking individually to council members about the site, about the potential improvements that this site would bring if developed for the stormwater. Currently, a lot of stormwater issues there because of the project across the street that does not adequately drain. And we started talking amongst ourselves as the client and basically said, in order for this development to be done, let's follow the book and do everything as the staff has requested and basically as the code requires, and not try to, basically, we were offering a portion of the property to the school, 10 acres, which required us then to have a divergence for open space because that could not be counted. Some people in the community were opposed to the school being there because of potential traffic and other issues here, even with the Planning Commission. There were a lot of issues which I'm going to briefly go down through, but what we've come with is this. Council agreed to table this for this reason. to go back and first of all, if we would agree to do the 87% of the residential architectural standards, which were being reviewed then but not approved, would basically offer up to do those, to make these quality homes in accordance with what they believed should be done. And my client said yes. As Scott said, there were only a few that could not be accommodated because of the style of home, and most council members thought that that was not going to be an issue. They were very pleased that we were going to incorporate the architectural standards, not only as something we would follow by the city, but actually in our zoning text, which you'd probably see. I'm going to go through this also. I know there were a lot of questions about having emergency access, and now we have a full access on Cleveland. But we also are going to be giving $91,500 to the city as we've worked with Alan Haynes and your staff to figure out the amount of money that should be given to improve intersections or basically traffic that might be caused, or basically this traffic will be participating with other traffic, and so what needs to be done. So it'll be done at the city's guidance and not ours. We also, of course, will be doing our own traffic improvements that we have to do according to the to our traffic study. So this will be in addition to those particular things that we have to do. I'm going to go through and basically, because I don't think I've ever represented a client that literally said we'll do everything, and I think it's worth reading quickly. They provided 15 feet of additional right-of-way along the east side of Summit Road. They modified the dimensions of the entry signage and modified it from the hanging to the monument style, and are in agreement with doing everything in accordance with the sign code. They moved the landscape buffers from east of the retention basins along Summit Road to the west side of the basins adjacent to Summit Road. We had originally thought they would be better in since we had the ponds out there at the entry, but the code says it's supposed to, the buffer's supposed to be between the road and anything, so we moved those. They revised the tree spacing from the trees and took that variance away. Instead of having 50 feet on center, they now have 30 feet on center. They even enlarged the stormwater management facilities on this project to account for previous inaccuracies, of course, as we've discussed numerous times, prior to this developer coming in, and undersizing and downstream design calculations in stormwater facilities, and to assist with attempting to alleviate the current downstream drainage issues that the city is encountering. And in fact, I believe one of the letters and one of the speakers that will be here tonight provided pictures of the actual drainage issues when there's large storms, and how basically this has been designed to start alleviating that and accommodating that so that does not happen. They eliminated the variance for the eyebrows and increased all centerline radii to a minimum of 150 feet. They increased the minimum cul-de-sac radii from the city's required 40 feet to the minimum 48 feet that the fire department requires. They shortened Saffron Cove Court and Lemon Grass Court to 500 feet. No variance for the length of the cul-de-sac. They revised the cul-de-sac layouts to provide 25 foot of open space and tree preservation between the rear of the lots and the perimeter property lines. They removed stub streets to the north and on the south property lines. They widened Sage Point Avenue right-of-way and pavement from Saffron Cove Court, Lemon Grass Court to Burdock Drive. They changed emergency access only to full access to connect to Cleveland Road. They included a 12-inch water main connection to the Southwest Licking Community Water Sewer District elevated water tank site. They reduced the number of lots from the original concept from 211 to 183, which is in accordance with the future land use plan. They increased the side yard setbacks from 5 to 8 so that we have a minimum of 16 feet between homes as requested. They increased the common open space from 39.9% of the property and excluded those areas reserved for stormwater management facilities. They maximized the number of homes backing up to open space to be 173 of 183 homes. They relinquished commitment to dedicate 10 acres to the Licking Heights School District and included that acreage into the overall layout of the project. And if you've seen it, you probably see that a lot of that area is going to be natural open space for people playing ballparks, that type of thing. This is the space that had originally been for the school, which now will have a lot of natural open space, lots here, and so on. They added the residential architectural standards with which Sage Point homes will be required to comply. Now, I don't know if this is in your packet, I believe it is, but I thought this was a good rendition of where we were and where we've come. If you look at the red lines behind, you'll see how it was originally or designed at the last time you saw it. If you look at the black, you'll see how we've made the changes. I think it's a pretty good, I don't know if you want me to pass it around or you wanna look at it, maybe you don't wanna touch it. Yes. Mhm. So, they put every effort forth to address comments from the council members and definitely to address the questions and the comments that this planning commission had in our several times that we met. Do you have any questions?
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll start down here, Rob.
No real questions, just probably the comment that you guys have done a great job of really listening to what we wanted.
Thank you.
I personally appreciate you getting rid of the 10 acres.
I knew you would.
That
I was gonna look right at you, but I didn't do that.
that was my pet peeve, so we appreciate the efforts to
Thank you very much.
bring it into our guidelines.
And no questions.
John?
It's not that I have a question. Mine is probably more of a statement from the standpoint that I personally wasn't here on any of the previous presentations. I just want to say that let me just speak openly by saying, okay, so you did come up to code, so yes, I encourage you and applaud you for doing that, but if we was there already, maybe we wouldn't be here today. We probably have all this already passed already, in my opinion. Yes, you put in, you went 16 feet between the houses, made that better. The water main, that was great. The fire department requirements, you came up to that. So basically, I look at it as a person doing their job.
Can I?
Yes,
I think
you
that's a
may.
great comment, and let me explain some of the things that
Okay.
you may not know from the
Right,
past.
that's why I say I
Okay.
wasn't here prior to. So.
Okay, for instance, this is a PUD, a planned community.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no code requirement of side yards.
Okay.
It's what a person offers up, and if it would have been approved, it could have been approved. It's not more right now than it was then, it's just more what the planning commission wanted,
Gotcha.
okay? In regards to open space, we had sufficient open space if we were allowed to count the school, which the code says you're allowed to count.
Okay.
But because the school did not say it would be used for a school, we had to take that 10 acres away. So even though it was
Gotcha.
open space, we couldn't count it.
Okay.
Then there were also issues that people had with giving the school property, which we didn't think we would encounter.
Okay.
So we had to go back and basically discuss this instead of just taking it away. We had to go back and discuss it with the school.
Gotcha.
Another thing that we had to have a variance for was because there has been so much flooding and problems with water drainage on this and all the surrounding properties.
Yes.
We had to add so much more water drainage storm facilities than we most typically would, because we're now gonna have to take care of all other people's properties, that it was larger than the amount we're allowed to use,
I got you.
because we were addressing another problem. So the way we got rid of that is when we took the school back, we basically inherited an additional 10 acres that allowed the additional stormwater to not be too much and allowed our open space to be just a little bit more than even required. So it was more of a balancing act than trying to be in a code situation. So that's why we tried to balance it all out.
Okay, great. Glad you guys did that. Appreciate it. 'Cause
Sure.
Initially, just hearing your proposal and representing your client, I felt like, okay, they came up with the code. What's the big
Yeah.
deal?
Yeah,
Should,
we-
a person
Sure.
should have done that already.
yeah, I agree with you.
Okay.
But in this particular case, there were so many issues that we had to address, and that's how we did that.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What do I want to ask you? Oh, so you had a beautiful list of every answer to our questions except the intersection of Broad and Summit.
Mhm.
Are you going to fix that and just redo the whole thing and give us turn lanes and improve that? Because that, to me, is a huge, huge, huge problem, and I think for the rest of the residents.
It is a huge problem.
So,
Yeah, and it's-
we're adding so much density here, I just don't see it addressed.
Well, the monies that we're given, as you know, we're doing our own improvements that were required under our code section, under the traffic study. But the money we're giving is basically going to be, as Scott said, used as basically the city thinks needs. In addition, we also know that the city's working on getting together with, some other developers on establishing new improvements at Broad and Summit, with the development of, the existing properties there that I'm also involved in. Coughlin owns, the north and south corners, and we have been actually wanting and anticipating to work with the city on development, improvements there for lights and all that. Scott can probably go further into that, but the monies they're giving, the $91,500, whatever, can be used there if the city should so choose.
Is that in addition to the turn lane that,
In
They are
addition to what
moving
we're
in.
doing, yes.
in addition to
Yes.
the turn lane
It-
that's going to be there, that the potential for traffic at that intersection, I don't know how far down the road that improvement would be.
Well,
I mean,
that's
is
why we're
how,
working-
and I really would like answers to that if possible tonight before we, make any decisions. I really wanna hear what that's all about.
So the traffic study looks at so they're gonna access, if we look at the access on the Summit Road. It's determined if turn lanes required, they're providing that. Also, the impact study looks at the two nearest intersections, to their access point, so Havens Corners and Summit and Cleveland, and looks at the impact it will have on those intersections. The city does not have, at this time, we're in the process of establishing them, but we do not have impact fees in the code that say it is required. The applicant offered to provide money to address areas within the sphere of influence, which is those two intersections down Summit.
Right.
So they're under no obligation to do that, but they offer to do that. The public service director says, I want to allocate those funds to this area of influence, as indicated via the traffic impact study. So from what I understand, he is not interested in applying funding from this to Broad and Summit. However, we are currently in the process of identifying intersections that need improvements and costs of those improvements. And I think Summit and Broad is one of the top two that's on the list to make sure that's corrected, because it doesn't function well right now. So that's in the process of being identified, and the funding required in order to bring it to a level where the intersection functions as it should. The other caveat is Ms. Klima explained, there is potential for development. Where the old Summit Town was and the lot across the street, we had discussed this a few years ago, potentially about creating a TIF or do some sort of revenue stream wherein money generated in that area can go directly to improving that intersection. So there's still the option for that. It could still be part of our intersection improvement program or the roads program. So there's opportunities with that. So it is on the city's radar, but the applicant's under no obligation to correct that issue.
I know that, but I wanna know what you just told me as far as plans. And as we know, intersection improvement takes a long time to get funding. So we could be living, no?
Not always, no. But, what my client, had authorized me to do when we were trying to get that intersection improved several years ago was to work with the city for a TIF and funding. So, those conversations are here. I was hoping, very soon we could be back. I'll be here hopefully representing that, trying to bring this whole area to what it should be right now. And, but that is separate and apart from this, obviously. But this client's trying to do their part and gone even above that by giving the monies that are in addition to their own improvements. And then hopefully other landowners, as they develop, the commercial landowners, will be doing the same. And I can speak for one that is ready to do that.
Okay. I do have concerns about every time this has come to the table, city council has denied it.
Well, then,
2001,
I want you to look at the years.
2005, 2007,
And I've gone back on the history of that, if you'd like me to tell you why.
that would be great.
Mostly the storm problems of the water. And no one was ready at that point to step up to the plate in the earlier times. I've got the notes from Allison Terry, that type of thing, where, first of all, at one point the city had so many developments going on, they didn't want anybody to develop anything anymore. And then there was a time where the stormwater was so heavy, and then we have the depression of 2008, where everybody was saying, don't build any more houses because they're not gonna sell, and people are gonna go in foreclosure. So that's a general summary of why, that long ago, 13, 14, 15 years ago, this property was not rezoned.
I was kind of looking at do you know a timeline for when you expect the different phases to commence?
As soon as possible, they'll begin construction. I don't have that timeline with me now, but my client's trying to do everything as requested, so they'll be very willing to do what they need to do as far as that access point, as far as timing wise.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, in part I'm kind of thinking along our lines, if it gives us time for the intersection.
Well, actually, it's definitely not gonna be built next year at this time, and if anything, the first phase may be starting by then, but it'll be done in a phase-by-phase process, probably a 2 to 5 year project.
Oh, mine's kind of more observations. First of all, thank you for coming and giving us all the information on all the changes that you have done and the history. Appreciate that. One observation, and I know it just kind of has to do with the cluster mailbox on the plan that was there. And I know that's not completely finalized. You have that on the side of the fire hydrants, and I think the fire department might have an issue, and people can't park over there. So you may just want to look at where you put those cluster mailboxes.
Okay,
Okay,
certainly.
just something to think about. We noticed that they were over there, and they probably
Okay.
should be. Last one is actually for the parcel that's to the south of Burdock Road. You may just talk to them, because if that's going to become a road, there's going to be headlights going right into their house. So I just thought it'd be nice if maybe you guys just struck a conversation with them, just to see if maybe they wanted any buffering there or something. Just to have a
I see.
conversation with them, that's all. I can only imagine what it'd be like to have a house and all of a sudden, headlights are coming right into your house at night, so.
Okay.
Just something to think about.
Mhm.
Other than that, I have no other questions. So
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
With that, we will go to the public. First is Hessel Zuckerman. Hessel?
Okay.
Hessel.
Special.
And
I'll get the
next will
on
be,
bad.
you just want to go right down the line?
Yeah, just do that.
Call them in? Okay. Oh, sorry.
Good evening.
State your name and address, please.
Hashel Zuckerman, 6368 Summer Road Southwest. I live right across from this proposed development. I have
Hold on
my-
1 second, I gotta swear you in.
Oh, okay.
Do you swear that any testimony that you give in this matter will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so that you shall answer unto God?
Yes, sir. So I live across the street from this proposed development. I live in the old brick house right across the way. First of all, every time it rains, we're gonna, when we do decide to sell the house, we're gonna sell it when it rains, because we have pop-up lakefront property. So every time it rains, we can see the rain, all the water running across the road to us. We can also see the water running down the road to us, to our yard. Luckily, my house is built up higher than my property, but my entire property is so flooded. My shed, it's a 1920 or 30, so it's actually, you know, kind of tipping over. So, because the water just keeps on running through that. My other issue is our police force. We don't have much when it comes to police force. We want to now add 180 odd houses with how many families, and we don't have any way to, you know, to have any kind of police force patrolling them as well as the rest of Pataska. I come from Brooklyn, New York, so I know what it's like to be living on top of somebody else. Along with that comes crime. There's nothing you can do about that. That's what happens. When you put houses so close to each other in such a small space, and then to add on top of that, you don't have the police force to do the patrols, crime comes with it every single time. There's, you know, unless you have a police force to keep that controlled, that's what's gonna happen. So that's another issue. Then of course we have the schools. Well, we know how the schools are just overrun. There's just not enough space. We're adding another building for the schools, but now we're adding the traffic. As it is traffic, and we've gone over all of this, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10 times already, but we're just gonna have to reiterate it. The traffic is ridiculous. You know, you can't make a turn onto Summit Road from Broad, you know, when they're drop off pickup times, and expect to get home in the next 45 minutes, and I live just past the school. Come back the other way, now that we're adding this other school building, it's gonna be the same way. Cable Road is a mess, and it's gonna stay a mess. Now we're just gonna add that to Cleveland, we're gonna add it to the rest of Summit, and now we're gonna add these houses too. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Let's keep on doing the same thing and expect a different result. That's insane. That's literally insanity. So say no to this and revisit this when we have the money to put into to roads that can actually hold this, not roads that we have right now. Summit and Cleveland can't handle this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that any testimony that you give in this matter will be the whole truth as you shall answer unto God?
Yes, I do.
State your name and address,
Jerica
please.
Zuckerman, 6368 Summit Road, same as him. So I emailed Scott. I hope you each got a copy. I tried to print out at least the most important pages of the comprehensive plan, so at least you have something to reference back. My goal isn't to necessarily read it verbatim, but it's kind of short and long at the same time. You know, I'm just asking that you guys review and consider these points when voting in favor or not in favor of approving the plan and request to rezone the property. It does not comply with the criteria for approval. In section 125519, criteria for approval of a preliminary plan. In section B, it says the proposed development is in conformity with the comprehensive plan and other adopted plans or portions thereof as may apply, yada yada. The proposed development is not in line with the current comprehensive plan from 2006, nor is it in line with the comprehensive plan we are looking to move forward with. The current comprehensive plan first recommends the following on page 62. It's recommended that the city preserve the most unique and sensitive portions, this is discussing Summit Station and Lima Township, by designating this area for agriculture and open space conservation, specifically south of Havens Corner, not north of it. Primary uses should be park/open space/green space, agricultural, and low-density residential. The master land use plan follows this recommendation and lists this as a recommendation for agricultural, low-density residential. In fact, it lists this plot as a potential park site with an asterisk. In their proposal, I don't even see a playground, I don't see an actual park. They're leaving the green space, there is green space, but it's a requirement, this isn't an improvement. Based on the recommended use and the density of what the R87, no more than one dwelling unit for every 10 acres or less, depending on the underlying zoning, currently at 10, 5, and 2 acres, depending.
The underlying zoning is RD7, low to medium density residential, which states 1 dwelling per 2 acres. Applicants proposing a zoning change to medium density residential, PDD. The density standards can be found on page 66 and 67 as follows of RD7. Density between 20,000 square feet per lot to 2 acres per lot, depending on the availability of central water and sewers. The applicant's proposing lot sizes well under this minimum standard of 20,000 square feet, coming in at approximately 6,840 being the smallest lot that I observed. I believe that in previous meetings when zoning stated this project was in line with the current comprehensive plan, that they were only looking at the density and not the lot sizes that it clearly states in the RD7. I understand they're looking for PDD, which doesn't have its zoning, but looking at the current zoning, that's what we're looking at. The subdivision is being proposed between a cluster of schools and an already highly used roadway. The traffic burden will add an astronomical traffic to the residents in the area and those who need to travel there daily. The traffic study, are we using the old one, Scott? The one that was used for the first application, or is
That's
it a
correct.
new one?
It's the original traffic study provided when they applied,
And that was done at 10 a.m. and 5 p.m.,
if I recall, yes.
which is neither the times that the schools are in and out. And now that we're adding another school, if you go down Summit Road and you're actually going between like 6:30, like 9 o'clock, I don't leave my house if I don't have to before 9 o'clock because it's just impossible. My kids drive the bus because I can't even get through the line to get my kids to school on time. Are there adequate public services? I'm sure you're all aware we have a huge issue with the adequate police force at this time, and an urgent tax increase for additional funds to hire more officers and increase the pay to maintain these officers has been turned down recently. Well, this is going to be brought to the table again. Many residents are going to see a financial hardship due to the COVID-19 issues, and we are not likely to pass a permanent tax increase in the immediate future. Chief Brooks has recently stated that he sees the need for at least four full-time officers on staff at each shift. We're currently running with about 2, up to 3. If an injury crash occurs, it's required to be worked with at least 2 officers, which doesn't leave us the police force. We don't have adequate for our own current subdivisions, let alone adding a density project. Patasko is the 12th largest city in Ohio, nearly 30 square miles, about 17,000 residents. National average full-time officer per 1,000 residents is about 3.4, or 57.8 officers full-time for 17,000 residents. We currently have 22 full-time officers, 1 officer per 773 residents. When Patasko merged with Lima Township in 1996, they had 21 full-time officers for approximately 5,000 residents. This is all found on PD's page, on all that. While the city does not operate the school, our schools are a major public service. They must be considered. Bringing in almost 200 homes on a parcel that, if you look at the zoning code for 20,000 minimum per lot, it should be about 42 homes. The site across Summit Road was not approved under the current comprehensive plan. This was built back in 2001. Same with the mobile home behind the parcel, which again is being used for comparison. These were both put in place before the 2006 comprehensive plan. The neighborhoods don't fit into the rural, low-density atmosphere in the area, and to add more of these is not responsible expansion. As defined in the comprehensive plan, highest and best use, the most profitable use to which a property may be put. This theoretical real estate concept rarely takes into effect what such use would have on nearby properties or public facilities. Cities should use decisions and zoning regulations should attempt to balance the individual's property rights with the need to protect the public interest. Please understand that we're not asking that this land go undeveloped, nor are we asking you to wait any length of time before we do. We're asking as residents who live here, who will be personally affected by both drainage issues, traffic, school overcrowding, our own access to current police force and undue burden, and for the undue burden a subdivision of this density brings, higher crime rates with lower property values, and most of all, we ask that you don't take our rural and agricultural atmosphere and turn it into a continuation of the Wagner corridor. Let's stick to our current and future comprehensive plan and maintain our agricultural and rural charm in this area. I've included pages of the code as well as the 2006 comprehensive plan, which is really long. So these can all be referenced back to the original documents. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear that any testimony you give in this matter will be the whole truth as you so answer unto God?
Yes, I do.
State your name and address, please.
Matthew Rausenberg, address 6302 Summit Road Southwest. Let me give you an idea where that's at. That is exactly at the corner of Summit and Cleveland. The intersection that would be most affected by this is my front yard, my side yard. This development, why I appreciate someone wanting to bring something to our town, I don't think this would be a good fit to be bringing to our town. We have a very unique rural landscape here, and 183 homes on 34 acres is not what we envisioned for this community. Other parts of the community it might work for. Summit Station's a little bit different. We were adopted by the city many years ago. We still enjoy our rural roots out there. Majority of the property out there, there's a lot of 1 acre or greater lots. That's what those of us who live out there move to that area or have grown up in that area with. And that's what we'd like to continue to see. The idea of rezoning this as a PPD is not something I can't even believe that the commission's even entertaining, because even though they have finally fell in line with many of our community's ideals, there are a few things that, according to our staff report, I'd like to figure out who our staff is referring to in that, because they say that this would not impact our police force. It would in fact impact it. You're putting in 183 homes. You're talking upwards of 400 additional people in an area where we're barely able to get coverage as it is right now because we can't get enough support to fund it appropriately. We finally got fire support out in that area, and we're paying heavily on it in taxes, and you want to burden that with more houses and more people. It's not going to impact utilities. We just finished putting in a utility loop to allow water to flow through there. That was before the completion of the new high school, which is going to dip into that and terrific. So you're gonna put in, again, 183 homes. That is, at any given time, how many people cooking, showering, doing laundry. That's gonna put a great impact on our utilities that we've finally got up to snuff out there. And then you go into our schools. We don't have the support, we don't have the room in the schools, even with the new school being built. And then traffic. Our roads out there were built for the farmer to barely get his tractor up and down the road. We are still using chip and seal out there. And we want to put 183 homes on 34 acres in the middle of a farm field. We're talking an additional almost 400 cars going up and down that road. And yes, right now, it's easy to look up there and go, there's not a whole lot going on that road. But let school get back into session, you can't move through there. I can't back out of my driveway some days because there's 4 or 5 cars deep trying to pull out of what has been deemed by this own city as a dangerous intersection. Summit in Cleveland, dangerous intersection. It's a small road and a big road. And I find it, I love the idea that they're willing to give money to help prove it. But 91, your major intersection improvement is gonna cost over $2 million. That's barely a drop in the bucket for one intersection, let alone 2. And let's not even talk about the mess that is Broad and Summit. That's a whole nother problem, but this is going to trickle into it. So I do not feel as though now is the time to shove this many homes into the tiny area of Summit Station that is not ready for it, that has not got the infrastructure for it, that does not yet have the support system of our public safety, our utilities for that yet. And I urge you guys as the commission to once again tell the council that this is not a good fit for our town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jody Bowen. Yes, sir?
Raise your right hand, please.
I'm sorry, thank you.
Do you swear that the testimony that you give will be, in this matter, will be the whole truth as you shall answer unto God?
Yes,
State your name and address, please.
thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jody Bowen. I live at 13645 Cleveland, across from where this development is proposed. First off, I'd like to thank the board for their patience in dealing with this project. I think it's drug out way too long as a result of the unresponsiveness of the applicant. And I'm glad to see that your persistence in making sure that things are done properly has at least got us this far. So I want to thank you for that. And staff, not just the commission. I'd also like to add that I have a lot of concerns. The density is obviously one. I'm not going to sit here and say the same things that everyone else has, because I agree with everything that everyone else has said. Traffic is a huge concern. I have pictures on my phone from February 28th where the mayor was directing traffic at Broad and Summit because there was an accident with a bus. The traffic backs all the way up there and all the way through the car wash, and people are dodging each other as they're trying to pull into the school. It's ridiculous. It is just ridiculous. And as Jerica pointed out, that the traffic study was done at 5 o'clock, which those studies do not impact when the worst traffic is, which is when school is in session. So that might be a typical rush hour in a different intersection, but not in this particular case. I've lived in my house for over 30 years, and I enjoyed the rural area. I understand that this property will be developed at some point. The condition of the road that I live on is crumbling, to be honest with you. There's construction traffic right now coming out of the trailer park, and those heavy trucks, dump trucks, there was 20 or 30 passes today. So in addition to the 400 cars that will come from this high of a density, there's going to be also construction traffic that's also going to impact this area with the schools. Earlier there was discussion about how this POD is 87% compliant. I think there's been so many changes that it's confusing of what 80% or what the 13% isn't. So if this board or commission would consider it, I would like to know what isn't compliant, because it seems to be unclear at times of where we're at as far as the 80% that isn't compliant. That had to be calculated in some form or manner. So what isn't compliant? To me, this is no different than the Hunter's Ridge development that was proposed in early 2019 that was at Mink and Refugee Road. Those roads, Mink for sure has a better capability of taking the traffic than this particular area, yet it was deemed too high of a density for that project. I don't see that this project is any different, even with the changes that we have right now. So I appreciate your time and your consideration and the hard work of this commission and the staff as well. And I thank you.
Thank you.
That was the last speaker request we had. We do have one for Jason Wisniewski, who is one of the applicants, but he said that he will not be speaking unless there's any specific questions that he would need to answer.
Is there any questions because we will bring Connie back up to answer to the statements that were done. Does anybody think they're gonna have any questions for the developer? Okay.
We're gonna address Connie.
Connie, please.
Sure.
You're still under.
Okay, thank you. As I usually say at these meetings, it's unfortunate that the people that are against something show up and the people that are for it don't. And that usually happens at these, so you hear a lot and you start thinking, oh goodness. But we've heard these concerns from day one, which is why we've basically done a lot of what we've said. First of all, I did not get the additional information that was provided that she's talking about, but the future land use plan is currently in place. This is in conformance with. It has the same density as the R20. This is not shown as being a park area. This is shown as being an R20 area. And as staff has basically stated in every one of their staff reports, this area, if it was 20,000 square foot lots as a straight zoning and not, we actually did that and even had council members look at that in their development committee, and they said they didn't like it as well. And the reason is because when you take a property like this and develop it in all lots and no open spaces, then you have all lots and no open spaces. And the open spaces you see here and the naturalness of all of these areas that we've added, we also have the play areas, the open areas for ball fields, and also the retaining areas. It's much better than having lots cover all the site, as most developments are around there. Actually, as most subdivisions are before PUD started this happening. So we are in conformance with that future land use plan. Of course, stormwater was mentioned right away. We knew that, we've heard that, and that's one of the reasons why we investigated it and basically had to find out what the problem was, because it wasn't really all on our site. It was coming down the road. And that's why we hired a storm engineer who came up with the information and reviewed it with your engineers, with the city, and they agreed that we were basically going to accommodate a lot more stormwater than required by our development. The property, as it's being proposed, its density itself is almost 46% open space. Almost half of the property is not developed with houses, but with open space. Has it changed the density? The smaller lots, which people are basically buying now, not smaller houses. We've not even asked for a variance from that. The houses are the same size as is required by your code, R20 standards. No variances there whatsoever. And as long as I've been in the city, and I've been here since I was born, there's always been school problems. There's always been road problems. Stopping development and stopping a city from being full of people does not take that away. Hopefully, we will work together more, as my client's trying to do, to accommodate the issues that come with people living in a city that they want to be in. Patasko is a city. It's not a rural township. It's not out on a country road. It's a city. It has a lot of issues. I've been here a lot, in storm water and roads and schools are always brought up. But schools, you don't stop and close schools because a city's growing. A city has to work together. It's a community. My client basically said, let's try to do everything we can to accommodate, but we know people want to live in Pataskala. Let's try to make it the best development we can.
Anybody have any questions for Connie or anything?
Not comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we'll deliberate for a little bit and open discussion. Just so you know too, Frank, just so you know, when we put a motion up, we say to approve, but then you have the right to vote yes or no. So we don't say that to not approve it until you vote.
Okay.
Okay, just so you know.
Thank you.
I know it gets kind of confusing
right.
when we do that, so just so you know how we do that.
Okay.
Well, I have a question for Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Summit, are there any plans for replacing Summit, widening it, aside from this? Are there any plans for addressing drainage issues? Because obviously, like was stated, some of the water is not coming from that property, it's coming from down the road. Is there anything being addressed concerning drainage on the road, replacing the road itself, just Summit?
From my conversations with the public service director, he said the oversizing of the retention ponds in this project will help the drainage issues in the area, particularly with Glenbrook across the street, because from what I understand, their stormwater facilities were undersized. To address other drainage along Summit without speaking with Mr. Haynes, I don't know off the top of my head.
but there's no plan for replacing Summit Road and improving it? Because
Again,
the
I
road
don't,
itself is kind of bad.
again, I don't know without speaking with Mr. Haynes where that is in the process.
Okay. And when I think of, you know, that's great, they're offering $91,000 for improvements, but truly, any improvement is gonna be millions of dollars. So, when I think about Ohio itself is already suffering the effects of COVID and the loss of revenue. I don't know what Pataskal is looking at, suffering and finances that way. So I'm wondering, how much money are we gonna have for improvements, for roads?
I guess the question to that too would be, how much more revenue does this bring in from residents for the roads? I mean, it's a double-edged sword for that question.
I don't think it brings in millions,
Well, again,
So-
you know, it's,
but, all right, that's the question I have. That's all I have.
Scott, if I might, they've met every requirement that was asked on the codes, right?
Correct, from the November Planning and Zoning Commission hearing, all the comments have been addressed.
Okay. My thing about the schools, and I get to school, again, I've lived here my whole life, you know, so I get that. But in the city, you don't build a school out in the country to expect it to still stay out in the country. It's not a rural town, it's a city. And you know what's gonna happen when you build a school. Houses are gonna come around it. You know, that's a fact of life. That's just my comment on the schools. While they are overcrowded, they've been overcrowded since the 60s and 70s. That's why they built one school and two school and another school. So those are just things about the schools that my question is, do they meet all the codes? And, you know, the roads, we've gone round and round, and I agree with you, Ann, but we all know until you build it, they don't come. You know, I mean, you look at all the surrounding cities and all that, the roads don't
Except
get.
they are coming, even though our roads aren't improved.
No, I meant if you don't build it, the roads don't get improved. They just stay the way they are. You know, you don't build a great big, unless you're New Albany where, you know.
It took 10 years for me to get my road improved. When we passed the tax for road improvement. 10 years later, my street, my portion of the street is getting replaced.
Again,
10
my
years,
point is though,
so
if you don't have your house probably wouldn't have,
we've
had you not
gotten
added
more,
houses.
we've been getting more and more homes, but it took 10 years.
I hear you,
Okay.
I hear you. I'm just
So
saying,
I'm not,
it wouldn't have been added, you might have still been tar and gravelled or gravel, you know.
but it may.
I'm just saying, if they
I
don't build it,
understand,
they
I
won't come.
understand the arguments are both ways. I get it. That road and the traffic on that road in particular, because of the schools and the new school being added, I have concerns about the safety of our residents with that traffic. I just do. So.
I understand that.
yeah.
But again, the question is do they meet our codes?
The
We're
way
planning and
they're
zoning.
proposing it, no. I mean, when you look at the requirements for, let's just go over. If it was low density residential, we would have 42 homes there, the way it's written right now, right?
Mhm.
They're wanting to add 183 homes. And then the current code,
But correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, that was already approved once and then it's come back to try to tweak it from city council, correct?
Planning and Zoning Commission recommended denial
Then I-
in November of last year. So it goes up, went up to council, so regardless of approval or denial, so long as there's a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission, it will go up to council for final determination of the zoning. So it was not approved, there was some discussion at the council level to tweak a few things, that's why we're back here. So from a density standpoint, it's zoned RD7. The current future land use map recommends R20, which is about 20,000 square foot a lot, so almost a half acre. So based upon density, they're in line with the recommendations of the comprehensive plan. Not current zoning, but recommended land use per the future land use plan.
Okay. Go ahead.
But the future land use plan is not to be, we're not considering that.
Mm-hmm.
But if we just go off of the, burden on the existing street network alone, it doesn't pass the muster. It just doesn't. That alone. That's all I have. I'm done.
Okay. Well,
Yes.
go ahead, Chuck.
Since it was in November, that's when I came on the council. I probably didn't make I believe I didn't make a vote on that because I wasn't familiar with the project. But reading it, as we got a chance to read the packet at home and things of that nature, what comes to my mind is the location of, go down the Watkins, hang left, the new development that we're talking about doing there, the gated community, how they shrunk it down to 60 houses versus in 5 cul-de-sac, how they accommodated. And this is what goes in my mind when I see this. I see 183 homes. I see a lot of homes. I see the lack of, I'm listening to the residents because I can put myself in their position and in their shoes, and I would be concerned about safety. I would be concerned about crime. I would be concerned about impact of utilities. I'd be concerned about traffic. I would be concerned if my house was on that corner of that intersection. I would be very concerned. So then I'm thinking 183 homes, maybe that's too big of amount of quantity. Maybe we need to narrow that down, like on the, you remember the location, go down to Watkins, hang left, and is a mill?
Scenic View Estates, that's
Mill.
south and west of Beechwood Trails and north of Hazelwood.
Yes, and we doing and that the horse branch back in there?
It's west of that, yes.
Yes. And we're doing about 60 homes.
That's what they proposed, yes.
Right. So I'm seeing it as, maybe 183 is just too many for me. Maybe that needs to be cut down to more than half, 3/4, and make it down to about 60 homes or something like that. Bigger lots, cul-de-sacs. I'm seeing something different. Keep the agriculture. That's just my thoughts right now. From the things that I've heard and hearing the residents, feeling their heart, and putting myself in their shoes.
Is that being farmed now, or is it just the grass fields?
It's my understanding it
I don't
has
know.
been in farming. I don't know with the rains and scheduling if it's currently in farm production, but historically it has been.
Ah, okay. That's fair. Thank you, Charlie. Well, with that being said,
Connie's
are
trying
we
to-
ready to? Oh, yes, Connie?
May I have another comment?
We can do that, correct? Under our
According
rules?
to the rules, and I vetted this with the law director, I guess, as the chairperson, you could do that. However, I think, sticking per the rules would probably be the best course of action.
Okay.
If I may, it says, following the conclusion of comments from the public, the applicant and or the applicant's representative of the Planning and Zoning Commission may deliberate on the application and ask questions. So,
Of staff.
staff, but I'm also can answer questions, can't I?
You have the chance to provide the comments mentioned by the public, so at this point, we're on to number 6, where they can ask questions of staff.
Okay.
So I guess the question is, does anybody wanna make a motion, or where are we at on this?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I move to recommend approval of application number ZON 19-003. And we wanted the modifications that were recommended, the two on there. Do I need to actually read those out?
Probably best.
Right, applicant shall address all comments from planning and zoning staff, city engineer, public service director, and West Licking Joint Fire District. Also, any subdivision identification signs shall be compliant with section 1295.92, sorry, 1295.09, I guess that's -B-8
Correct.
of the Pataskala Code.
Okay, we have a motion, second by anybody?
I'll second.
Second, Emily? Roll?
Mr. Truax,
Yes.
Ms. Rogers,
No.
Mr. Bagarrow,
Yes.
Ms. Butler,
No.
Mr. Davis,
No.
Mr. Burring,
No.
Motion is failed. I think we got another number 8 coming back at us, so. All right. Does anybody need a break, or are we ready to move on? All right. Moving on, we'll go to B on new business, the final plan application FP-20-001, Grand Communities.
Yes, sir. Like I said, this is FP 20-001. The applicant here is Grand Communities LLC. Location's at 200 West Broad Street. Acreage is 22.8. And they are requesting approval of a final plan for sections 1 and 2 of the Heron Manor subdivision, comprising 63 lots pursuant to section 1113.28 of the Pataskala Code. So if you look here is an area map of the property in question, with the property outlined in yellow. And you've got access onto West Broad Street here, also on Isaac Tharp and Alonzo Polner. So a little bit of zoning history. The amended preliminary plan for Heron Manor was approved by the commission on June 5th, 2019, with the condition that ZON 18-012 be approved, and that was for the little 5-acre section that was on the front of the property that was zoned general business originally, and they wanted to rezone that to R10 to be in line with the rest of the subdivision, so that zoning change was approved by City Council on June 17th, and the Board of Zoning Appeals also approved 2 variances, one to allow street trees to be placed at 50-foot intervals instead of 30 feet, and one to allow for a hanging sign instead of a monument-style sign. So here's a summary as approved. The proposed subdivision was 46.6 acres, 145 lots. It followed the cluster housing regulations under Chapter 1275. Has a density of 3.72 units per acre, and there are 10.18 acres of open space, or approximately 21.94% of the proposed subdivision. So take a look here is a view of just sections 1 and 2. So we're doing that access onto Broad Street, coming up here on Heron Manor Avenue and wrapping around just into the cul-de-sac here for sections 1 and 2. Here's an illustrative site plan. Kind of shows where the landscaping is going to be going and the street trees. So here's a quick summary. Section 1 is 31 lots. Section 2 is 32 lots. And sections 1 and 2 will consist of 2 different types of lots: a 55-foot width lot with a front setback of 25 feet, a side setback of 5 feet, and a rear setback of 20 feet. In section 1, there'll be 15 of those lots. In section 2, 32 lots. And then we have a 75-foot width lot with front setbacks of 30 foot, side setbacks of 10 foot, rear setbacks of 25 foot, and there will be 16 of those in section 1. But just do note that perimeter lots 1 through 20 will have a minimum 25-foot rear setback. So here's those lots 1 through 20 along the west side here that will have a larger rear yard setback. So PP 19002 was approved with the following conditions. The first one being the applicant shall address all comments and questions of the planning and zoning department. 2, the applicant shall address all comments and questions of the city engineer. 3, being the applicant shall address all comments and questions of the utility department. 4, the applicant shall address all comments and questions of the public service director. And 5, the rezoning application ZLN 18012 shall be approved by city council. 6, the applicant will coordinate with the United States Postal Service and the city staff in determining an appropriate location of the required cluster box units. 7, all construction traffic shall be routed through Heron Manor. And that was all the conditions for that. So as part of our review, staff has the following comments. The size of the sign face was not indicated on the landscape plans, however 32 square feet maximum is permitted. And we would like to know whether or not that sign will be illuminated in the manner how it will be. Condition number 6 from the approval of the preliminary plan. The CBU plan was approved by the Pataskala Postmaster. However, the final development plan does not detail the locations of where those boxes will be placed and other technical details. So a possible modification was added to have the applicant revise those plans to reflect the submitted cluster box unit plan. However, all of our other comments have been addressed. Here's a look at the CBU plan that was submitted for the mailboxes. So the little boxes in red here are where the cluster box units will be. The shaded areas being served by, which houses will get their mail from what mailbox. So, as part of our other departments and agencies, the Public Service Director commented that the engineering plans have already been approved, that he does not have any further comments. City engineer did not submit written comments, however, they did approve the engineering plans. The utility directors did not submit any written comments, however, they did approve the engineering plans. The West Licking Joint Fire District had the following comments. Any streets that are 28 feet or less wide shall have no parking signs posted on the fire hydrant side of the street. All cul-de-sacs shall have no parking signs posted, and a temporary T-turnaround shall be installed at the end of Leatherleaf Way. However, the fire district followed up later after the staff report had already been sent out and clarified that the sign comments have already been addressed, and as long as the stub street does not exceed 150 feet, a turnaround is not required. As for surrounding properties, to the north we have it zoned R10, high density residential, which will be future subsequent phases of Heron Manor, and agricultural, which is currently woodlands. To the east we have it zoned high density residential, which is the settlement of Pataskala. To the south we have it zoned M1 light manufacturing, which is a lumber yard, GB general business, which is an auto sales lot, and R10 higher density residential, which is single family homes, and to the west it's zoned agricultural, and it's currently a farm field. So, should the Planning and Zoning Commission choose to approve the applicant's requests, following modifications may be considered. Number 1 being the applicant shall address all comments from the Planning and Zoning staff in the West Licking Joint Fire District, and 2, the applicant shall revise plans to reflect the cluster box unit locations as approved by the USPS. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions? We'll start with you, Frank.
No questions.
Rob? Ann?
I have a question about the monument sign,
Yes.
and they went to BZA for that. Why did they go to BZA for that?
So the
Instead of
code
us?
specifies that it has to be a monument sign. It's specific on what type of sign that is, like a ground mounted sign, and the sign that they proposed is hung, it's suspended from a wooden pergola, so technically it didn't meet that code, and they got a variance for it to allow for that.
Okay, they didn't have to come to us, they had to go to BZA, or
Correct.
did they have the option?
It's always BZA.
They had to go to
BZA.
BZA for signs.
Mm-hmm.
What is the sign at the other, down the street, the settlement? What's their,
It's on the fence, it's mounted on a fence.
the one right now, the one that's attached to it?
It's mounted, the sign's mounted on a fence.
Okay. Is it lit?
I think it's got lights out in front. I don't think it's illuminated, but I think it's,
Uplit maybe?
uplit, I think so.
Don't they have trees? Like,
There's
I meant to
shrubbery and
drive
all
by
kinds
there
of
today to
stuff around
remind
it.
myself.
I can't
and
remember, I
it's
mean,
very
there are
pretty.
some trees
It's
out,
very
yeah,
pretty.
there
I
are.
really like there.
Fence, settlement catastrophe,
Mhm.
referring to, right? Okay, yes,
Yeah, it's right out here.
Yeah.
It's that development right there.
development I live
You live there?
in. Yes.
Oh, okay. So tell us, what is that?
What's your question, what's your concern?
The sign entrance.
It's not, it is lit, but it's not illuminated.
It's lit. It has trees.
Yes,
Yeah, it's really pretty.
yes.
I'm
White picket fence.
thinking, why wouldn't it match kind of that same aesthetic? But that's too late,
Don't know.
except they haven't addressed whether it's going to be lit.
Correct.
So we need to address that, or do they do that with BZA?
That'll be addressed with the possible modification that they address all comments from city staff. We just need to know how it's gonna be lit and make sure that it meets city code.
Okay, gotcha. And, what was my other question? Oh, the boxes for the mailbox. The first box, now I've never used these, so I don't know what, I'm assuming you get out of your car.
Mhm.
There's no parking area for those. So
Sorry,
there's
what
no
was that?
parking area for these, so they would be parking in the street, getting out, getting their mail, getting back in.
Has the
And
post
that's-
office given any guidelines to that yet, or, I know that's a post office thing now, correct?
I believe it was initiated in 14 or 15. They have a like a handbook for developers that talks about where these should be located. The interesting thing is they say it should be within 1 block of a house, which this is not blocks, you know, in these types of subdivisions. So the applicant got in contact with the post office and said, here's what we propose. They said, that'll work. And then we had a public service director review it. He says, that'll work. So we're saying we just need that shown on the plans. There's easements and things that will need to be indicated on the plan, so we just would like them to revise that so it's on the same document.
I mean, do you think homeowners are gonna want that in their front yard and the traffic it's gonna bring every single day?
They don't allow house-to-house mail delivery anymore.
I know, but I think the location needs to be, I mean, in a separate area you can drive up to in one area, like apartments do. They have them in one area, they have a parking lot for it, you go
I think
there.
that will be a discussion though with the
And-
developer.
But
I'm asking
their
why.
guidelines say it has to be within 1 block. So if we had one common mailbox area, it would not meet, from what I've read, the postal service requirements.
If I may say, it's like Westport, it's within walking distance too. So everyone is not driving up
Yeah.
to get their mail, it's in walking distance, you can literally,
That's true.
so
Mhm.
Well,
they
for
are
some people, I don't
strategically placed in walking
I
distance.
wouldn't wanna walk there in the wintertime, I can tell you.
I'm just saying.
Don't buy a new build.
Don't mind, yeah, don't.
We can't buy a new build then. I'm with you.
Well,
But-
mine is in front of my house.
Well, besides all that, the location of the very first one is at the entrance and the exit to Broad. I just don't know if that location's the best.
All I can say, it's been vetted by the postal service and the public service director.
So that means it's in distance of X amount of houses that will go to that box. So it's
Right.
probably within walking distance for them.
If it's not snowing
Hey,
and icy,
alright,
okay.
are you done?
And then, well, that's okay, I'll let you go ahead and I'll get my thoughts.
You'll come back to it?
Yeah.
My question is, as we begin to talk about Isaac Tharp, which I live on that street, so I wanna know how much am I allowed to say, or do I have to be eliminated from this conversation? Because it does somewhat affect me to one degree, but then again, it doesn't. So,
Are you east or west of John Reese?
John Reese, I am west of.
I mean, just so I have a general
I
idea.
am the last house, corner lot, that's why I feel for the gentleman earlier. I am the corner lot, before the mound of the dirt. Then they cut down some of the trees just recently,
Mm-hmm.
and they are taking the dirt from that area and taking it to the front so they can start phase 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
So I am back where the last phase would be, Isaac Tharp, which I believe a road's supposed to come through there at some point.
It will be extended, correct?
Right, so
So,
am I allowed to comment and,
so with this, I'm not an attorney, but in terms of recusing yourself, eventually development is going to be near every commissioner's house, regardless, just because you live in the community.
right,
If you feel uncomfortable voting on it, you're more than welcome to recuse yourself, but it's best that you leave the room. That way there's no look of impropriety.
okay,
With final development plans and how I kind of explain it, it's a formal checking of the boxes. So preliminary plan, approved, what were the conditions? Did they meet the conditions, yes or no? Engineering plans, were those approved, yes or no? Did anything change as a result of the engineering plan? So typically that's when stormwater calculations are completed and everything. So a retention pond may need to be enlarged or shifted,
right,
which then impacts a lot. So as long as it's not astronomical, there's no real justification for it, then they've checked the box. So it's your comfort level.
yeah.
So if you'd like to recuse yourself, I can understand it. But it typically, from what I've been told, it's best if, go to the back of the room, or it's even best to leave, just so there's no air of impropriety.
So far as tonight goes, I would like to make a few comments pertaining to it, because we are talking about phase 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
Which at this point doesn't affect me. However, if we are looking at, which you already made mentions, the pond that is directly behind my house.
Mm-hmm.
That's supposed to be, from my understanding, supposed to be expanded.
Can you go to do we have that? I don't have that information tonight.
Okay.
But if that's a later phase, so we're not really looking at that tonight.
Right.
We're just looking at
1 and
this.
2.
Yes.
Okay, let me try to stay on 1 and 2 if I can. I guess I really don't have an issue with phase 1 and 2. I guess my question would be time-wise for the entire project. Because that would give me somewhat of an idea of the later phases that will affect. And when I say affect, it won't affect totally, because the mound, that's supposed to be not touched. It'll still be a divider there, and they're supposed to put tree lines up. Because I met the gentleman out there as they were doing the survey, and we kind of dialogued. This was right in front of the house.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, at some point, it would connect to Isaac Tharp and will run through. But again, I believe the point is to start in the front, 1 and 2, so the dump trucks don't come down Isaac Tharp and tear up the road and things of that nature. So,
That is correct.
have the effect of being impotable, I guess. So I guess, Scott, there's real no question. However, just concerns at some point in time, it may affect or may not affect.
I can understand, and in terms of their timeline, I would refer to the applicant
Yes.
to
Yes.
address that. But
Yes.
those will be the later phases on the northern end.
Yes.
Emily?
Is there gonna be an HOA?
Yes.
Okay. With the
Oh my
ability
God,
to
let's
levy
not talk about
assessments and with the ability to level assessments, that power? Up
From
to
my
any
understanding, yes, it would be
foreclosure?
traditional HOA that they would enforce their HOA requirements.
Perfect, thank you.
Can I comment on that HOA? The front half do not pay HOA of settlement of Pataskla. But the new phase 2, which I'm the last phase of that.
That, I believe the other ones who developed the original phases, but I believe Fisher
Fisher,
did the last phase, but they were not involved in the initial.
First, Jesus Lord.
Okay. I have no questions, so
Okay.
with that being said, we'll move on to the applicant. Troy?
Yes.
Okay. I'll swear you in, then state your name and address, please. Do you swear that any testimony you give in this matter will be the whole truth as you shall answer unto God?
Yes, sir.
Name and address.
Name is Troy Cameron, 7965 North High Street, Columbus, Ohio.
Anything you want to add in to the?
I know there was a couple questions. The size of the sign, it's 19.7 square feet. And will it be illuminated? Yes. Low voltage. Landscape lighting.
Uplighting,
I'm sorry?
would it be uplighting or?
Low voltage, yeah. It would just be underneath and showing up. I have a example of what it,
Be nice, be nice to see. Where is that gonna be located? Is that on Broad Street, right,
Yeah.
right at the entrance?
yes, ma'am.
Just right.
In your backyard, Is it gonna affect you? Is it gonna light up your backyard?
We'll light up this city hall, it's right here.
I know where it is. I just meant if it was set back or if it was
Yeah, so
on, from Broad Street
if you look at, you know, you get on my plans, I'm trying to get, but Heron Avenue, it'll be just, I believe it's just east of the intersection there. But that's a
Okay.
look of,
Okay,
what it
that's
appears.
nice. That looks
Do you have a copy
very
of that yet,
similar
Scott?
to the,
Jack?
Yeah, that was
Scott,
it.
you do? Okay.
Is the square footage of the actual sign face on there?
he said it was 19.
it's, I do know for a fact from, our developers or our engineers on that, it's 19.7 square feet. You're more than welcome to have this if you don't have a copy of it.
No, we have a copy of it.
Okay. And then I believe all the other comments, as far as the street signs are concerned, they are in the engineered drawings. And I have an example of that, a diagram of that, to show that if anyone would like to see it.
Doesn't hurt for us to, yeah, I mean, you can just kind of walk it by
Yeah,
us so
I
that
mean,
we don't.
There's signs, no parking signs throughout the,
Okay.
and it's on the final engineered, drawings, but you can see the no parking signs everywhere.
Oh, yeah, it was on the.
And then you had a diagram of the CVUs,
Oh, that's
correct?
already up on
Correct.
there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I think all those questions have been answered. Are there any other additional questions?
Oh, yeah. How long is how long is it gonna take roughly?
This, phase one,
1, 2, and can you speak to the other
this
phases?
meeting involves
3,
phase
4,
one
5?
and two.
Yeah, just 1 and 2?
Yes, sir.
All right, what's the timeline on 1 and 2?
Well, phase one will be the first, priority as far as building streets and whatnot. And that's all driven based upon demand and sales. So once we see how that goes, we'll then prep up and, perform phase two.
Dollar value of the houses?
That information I do not have offhand because I'm the land developer
Okay.
and we still have the last official owners.
Any other questions?
Are you doing the deed restrictions? Or is that something that Fisher will do?
That's something Fisher will do.
Okay.
We sent in a sample
Mm-hmm.
of what those are.
Mm-hmm. And that's included in the packet.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ann, did you have some questions coming?
The leather leaf T turnaround, it's gonna be a temporary installation for the
The-
fire department.
They said it was not necessary.
They
For the-
said it was,
It
it
was
said
less
it
than-
shall be installed at the end of leather leaf.
Correct.
Now it's not required.
If I may, the fire department originally submitted comments that it was required, but then they followed up after we had sent the staff report out saying that it's only required if the street's over 150 feet.
Oh.
So we'll just coordinate with the fire department to determine whether or not it'd be necessary.
Okay,
Doug White had sent a message on May 4th saying it was not required.
okay, very good. That's all I have, I think.
Frank, you got any questions?
No.
We ready to, no more questions, so we'll go ahead and have a seat.
Thank you for your time.
Want to deliberate for a few minutes? Discussion?
Too bad I wasn't here in June of 19. All I have to say.
I concur.
Go ahead.
Should have asked you, do you know what school district this will be in?
It's a split. We found that out. It's part Southwest Licking, part Licking Heights. There's a street that ends up being Licking Heights, and then
Okay.
for some reason, way in the back, are you Licking Heights back where you're at?
Yes.
Yeah. We've discussed that repeatedly, and
The split for
there
this,
is a split back there.
is it in the first phase that there's a split, or is it in the
This
second?
is Southwest
This is
Licking.
all Southwest.
This is
for
all Southwest
one and
Licking.
two.
In the settlement, there's an odd divide
Yeah.
that goes between two, but this one was all, Southwest Licking.
Yeah, the way that works is, new phase is, Licking, and we pay the HOAs for those up front. And they are Southwest. That's how that works.
Any other discussions?
Do we want the modifications if we approve?
Yeah, are we all comfortable with the modifications that's in there, you know, for the motion? No other additionals? Okay.
So then I move to approve application number FB-20-001 pursuant to section 1225.13 of the Pataskala Code with the following modifications. 1, the applicant shall address all comments from planning and zoning staff in West Licking Joint Fire District, and 2, applicant shall revise plans to reflect cluster box unit locations as approved by the USPS.
Second motion.
Seconded by Charlotte. Roll.
Ms. Butler,
Yes.
Mr. Burring,
Abstain?
Mr. Truax,
Yes.
Mr. Bagarell,
Yes.
Ms. Rogers,
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passes. Lost all my notes. They got buried. All right.
Not yet, because we didn't have one of the meeting paper.
I apologize, the notes got buried. Moving on then to other business. Scott, you want to discuss A?
Just so, if you remember, the TCOD application for the apartments on Watkins Road, that was appealed. The Planning and Zoning Commission's decision was overturned, so we were directed to approve the TCOD application. However, they still have to abide by all proposed conditions from the staff report as part of the appeal process. So they're still subject to all those conditions, but instead of it being denied, it was approved. Staff has formally approved that. They didn't have to come back to Planning Commission, so they will be moving forward with construction plans at this point.
And that was approved by the Licking County courts then. So
Their appeal
ours was overruled and
yes.
approved.
Based on,
And I can get you the legal briefing, but some of the things they said, for example, we said parking. Parking, it's like you have one car garage and then the driveway, but these are 3-bedroom apartments. So you're required a minimum of 2 per apartment. So technically, they met that requirement, but staff had some concerns about the functionality. If someone parks in the garage, someone parks in the driveway, then shifting cars all over the time. When does someone decide to park down the street in a public spot? You know, and that's just for, you know, 2 people living in the home with 2 cars. What if you have 3 and 3 cars? Then what happens? So we have concerns about the functionality of that. So that was highlighted. It says, you know, it meets your code, which it does. And that's probably something we need to look into to better address, you know, how many per unit and then how many guest spaces are appropriate, just so we can better address that issue. And then a lot of it, essentially, it came down to Planning Commission did not focus on the merits of the application and determine that it met the code or it did not, but rather based their, and I'm very paraphrasing here, but they based their determination on public comment rather than the code.
What about schools? They didn't address that?
I don't believe so. In the finding, they did not address anything with the school. I don't believe so.
Even though that's part of our code.
They met the codes, so that's where, unfortunately, that's where the courts went to. They met the codes.
There could probably also, that means just in the future, if you have a serious issue with something as it relates to schools or safety, then you make sure to make a comment about it and tie your reasoning back to the code says this. That way the court can rely on that.
Well, our
decision.
own
That was
superintendent
in there.
said, our own
Extensively.
superintendent
Yeah,
made comment about it,
Yeah.
so that's why.
yeah.
But anyway, okay, yes, I'd like to see the findings.
I would
wanna
like to
make
too.
sure that we're,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right,
Absolutely.
and that's where I,
and if we need
discussed
to,
before.
like Scott said, change code or address our code that it's, needs updating,
Yeah.
then we need to do that.
that's where I'd like, before I discuss the possibility of having a workshop with the law director, just so that we can find out where are we reaching and where are we, to keep the city from having to pay for the lawsuits too.
Correct.
You know, where, I know there's gray lines and then there's fine lines,
Right.
but just to find out so that we have a better understanding. If they meet code, can we reach, are we reaching, what's, you know,
Correct.
I think that's
Yeah.
just something that I'd like
I
to,
agree.
again, address with
Mhm.
the law director to find out exactly what are, when someone has met codes, you know, what are the ramifications if we vote those down.
Absolutely. Okay.
Then there was a couple other things. I spoke with Ms. Rogers, was it earlier this week or last week? And she mentioned the distressed property code has not been added to the code online. And I was explaining that typically, it's usually about July every year that we go through and any updates or changes to the code, we do a recodification and then we'll get pages from the company that provides those and then we'll have a new PDF online. She had mentioned that she would like printed copies of those once it's gone through, because after here it goes to council and then they may make more changes or things. And what ultimately, was it approved, was it not, what's the approved version? So she mentioned she'd like printed copies, but I just wanted to gauge folks to see, do you want printed copies, do you not? Just because I don't want to pass out 7 of them and then 6 people say, I don't want this, and pitch it. So I just wanted to kind of gauge.
I'd like a printed copy.
Okay.
please.
I'm fine with online.
Okay.
I'm fine.
Charlie?
Yes, I would like one.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Frank?
I'm good with online.
Okay.
I'll make mention when you can find them online, not in the actual code, but they're listed under the, how do you find them? The drop down, you know, where they're actually, you can find them if you know how to find them. If they're not, they're separate from the actual code. So the updates are not in the code until once a year.
Right.
So you have to know where to find them. So if you don't know where to find them, I recommend calling Lisa. She's like, thanks. And she'll walk you through it. It's not, huh? They'll give you a copy, but if you're going, not if you don't want it. If you do want it, but if you don't want it, and you go online to get it, you'll have to know where to find them.
If you go to the clerk of council and it's under approved ordinances, so then you can see, like for example, distressed properties is 2020 something something, it'll have the approved ordinance and then the text of the code change. So that's where you'd find it till it's codified again, and then you'll find it in the actual code section online.
Wow, gotcha.
Mm.
I can handle that.
Yeah. But, you know, often we forget, oh yeah,
Right,
we did that and we haven't heard anything.
right.
Whatever happened to it? Was it approved? Wasn't it approved? Where do I find it in the code?
Very true.
You know, so just a little, you know, housework, housekeeping.
Mhm.
All right.
Okay.
The last section, again, with my conversation with Ms. Rogers, we had briefly discussed regulations for parking on the grass prior to pursuing the distressed property code. I was looking to see, and I want to talk with the new city administrator to see if that's something he wants planning commission and staff to pursue, but to establish regulations to prohibit parking on the grass in certain locations. For example, right now, it's based upon when the structure was built, so it's become somewhat ambiguous because unless there was a change of use, so if there was a house built in 1960 and it's not in a platted subdivision, then there was no change of use by the time the code came into effect, therefore you can park on the grass, whereas if your house was built in 2019 and you're in a platted subdivision, you can't, there's a lot of ambiguity, so we'll need to find it. The other thing is, if someone has a farm and it's 20 acres and you park on the grass, I don't really see an issue with that. If you have the subdivision, maybe parking in the front yard isn't good. 20-acre farm, we can see that the polar extremes, but where does the line come? So that'll be something that we'll need to determine, but before we pursue it, I'd like to see if planning commission's interested, and then I can speak with the new city administrator to see if that's something he would like us to pursue.
I'm
You kind of brought it up, so
interested.
go ahead. No, I know, you brought it up, so go ahead.
So, I drive by properties on a regular basis, and if you have not noticed, you will now. Cars parking in their front yards, they're now mud, and they consider them driveways now because there's no grass growing there anymore, it's just mud. Or they've created one without any kind of permit. I think a lot of it is junk, they're junk vehicles. Some of it is, they just don't wanna park in their driveway because then they have to get out and move for their other person that wants to go to the store in their car, and so they don't wanna, do the back and forth. They can't park in the street. So, not that they can't park in a driveway, they just don't want to, they want to park in their yard. So that's the type of thing we're looking at. We're not looking to be oppressive, but we're looking to help the neighbors with their property values. So if they have a driveway, they need to park in their driveway. If they don't have a driveway, they may live, the only places that I can foresee that being a problem is in Old Town Pataskala, where you have the 1800s homes before cars were really an issue, and they had a horse and buggy, and that's about how much room they had for their horse and buggy. But they can always request, what, would it be a variance? Or, something if there was an issue with parking, and they needed to create another parking area on their property, or if they needed to,
There's different options we could go about, it's just finding, variance could be included in one of those. We do have something called a certificate of non-compliance or something along those lines, where essentially, I think when there was the merger, there was a lot of things that may have met township zoning, where there was no zoning, and now zoning is implemented, and the cities is, enacted throughout the city, that it's like, well, this doesn't meet anything. So there's potentially that, there's variances, there's some options if we pursue this that we'll need to look into, but we don't wanna make it too burdensome that, I don't have a driveway, there's no place to put a driveway. Am I gonna get fined for this every time I park my car, which is not fair, so we would look for those instances to find a resolution.
What is, I know we discussed the broken down cars and things like that. Did we come to a conclusion on all that where we were talking about cars? We got a lot of new people, so I just wanna.
So there is the discussion of an operable motor vehicle. So if Steve, the zoning inspector, were to go out, look at a car, is there air in the tires? Is the license valid? It's like it didn't expire in 1992. It's up to date on their tags. And he looks at it from the outside and says, I see nothing to say that this thing won't be street legal. So if he goes over and 4 flat tires, clearly no, or the tags have expired. But as long as upon visual inspection, he can't look under the hood and see if there's everything that needs to be there, but upon visual inspection, he determines it's operable, then it's operable.
How about if there's grass all the way up to the doors, but it still meets all those qualifications, but then it's obviously not moved for.
You can make that assumption, but kind of the way the code reads, it doesn't talk about, if you see weeds are taller than the car, clearly hasn't moved in quite some time. But if you look at the tires and look at the tag and say it's good, then you can make the assumption, but the code doesn't allow us to make that assumption.
and I really don't have a problem with someone not having a vehicle that's not running. Sometimes it's expensive to fix a car, or they're, but as long as it's parked on your property in a proper way and you cut your grass around it, we have code against weeds.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you're parking it in your backyard and you're collecting, and it's, we had discussed inoperable vehicles, but I don't think we ever moved forward with it because we instead focused on the property maintenance code, is that right?
The distressed property code?
Right.
Yes.
So we could potentially combine the two, parking in the yard and inoperable vehicles. We could potentially combine the two, I don't know. If they both need addressed, then we could address them at the same time.
That's a possibility if we were to put that in the parking section of the code, yes.
Okay.
I was gonna say, how much of the property maintenance code covers people parking their vehicle in the front yard for weeks at a time?
The distressed property code does not address
Oh,
parking.
really? Okay,
Correct.
okay.
And the parking, as far as, is there any thoughts about how, if it's a one-time thing or somebody's got a graduation and they have cars parking there versus, somebody's
Right.
chronically
Sure.
doing that, how do you enforce that? How does it, I heard part of the city council meeting last night, or, on Monday, and some people, trying to weaponize it potentially if they have a disagreement with their neighbors and trying to enforce it that way.
And that would be, so if we use a graduation party example, I think it's clearly a one-time thing, it's around graduation time. The city has no interest to go to someone's house and say, okay, congratulations, everybody move your car. Then we would look at it from a common sense standpoint and say, clearly this is a one-time thing, it's a graduation party, you know, they'll be gone in a few hours, but it would be the person who, like you said, chronically is parking in the front lawn, that, you know, you could go out any time during the week and see them doing it, that would be the ones that we would address.
Do you have an idea of how you define what chronic would be?
And this is the unique situation, that's one of those we'd have to look into. I think, so if, for example, someone called and said, you have this in place, my neighbor's parking his car in the front yard. Swing by on a Wednesday, there it is. And then try and change up the dates to try and see, it's like, this is clearly happening regularly. To go out and see it once, and then this is still the gray area that, you know, we talk about, was this a one-time occurrence that I just had to do this, I'm loading up the car, it's gonna be gone, or is it repeated? So those are some of the things we'll have to figure out how we go about doing it, but it's not to be, with code enforcement, it's not to be punitive. We don't have, you know, going to mayor's court is the last resort if we can't figure anything else out. So typically, we're pretty good through our code enforcement process of, you know, first step, we call it the door hanger, we'll knock on the door. If you're not there, we'll leave something on the door to say, hey, give us a call, there's an issue. If you get 7 days, if it's not corrected in 7 days, then you get a courtesy letter. Nicely worded saying you may not have been aware, but you can't do this. You have 7 days to correct it. Then there's the violation letter that says this needs to be corrected, and you have 10 days, and then if it's not done after those 10 days, then a summons for mayor's court can be issued. The first two steps, door hanger and courtesy letter, are not required by code. We just do that as a service to the community, not to be too heavy-handed with our codes, to seek resolving the issue rather than being punitive. The violation letter is required by code. So typically, as we move through this process, if it gets to the violation letter, that's when we say, you know, we can hit pause and work with folks that, if they got the violation letter, there's a car in the front yard, it may be junk, it's like, oh, my brother's coming next week to pick it up, after that, it'll be gone. And we go by next week, it's gone, okay. It's like, you know, where he's coming in 2 weeks, that's past the 10 days, but we'll give you the extra 4 if we can solve the problem, it's solved. So usually we do everything we can to get things resolved until it gets, we have no other options. So we would look into how do we do this effectively without being, you know, too heavy-handed with going about the enforcement.
And just so you know, Frank, Scott will go ahead and put together kind of a thing, and then we'll all get together and kind of go through line by line,
Okay.
discuss it, go over those terms or those, you know, definitions, and figure out what we want to do. And so that's what Ann's asking. And then, of course, as long as Tim says yes, it's on his docket, he'd like to do it. You know, so the question is, do we want Scott to go to Tim and at least ask him, or are we comfortable with what we have? Because there's a lot of things we have to discuss. You know, there's campers in the wintertime. Where do those fall? I mean, there's a lot of things that we'll have to discuss when we go through all that.
So is there enough staff to be trying to even enforce this?
Yes, you know, there's a bunch of stuff in the code there's a section in the code that I was talking about parking on the grass, that it was being enforced, but then we had legal clarification that says, well, here's the nuances of it, so made it more difficult. So there is enough staff, to handle, these violations.
Okay, because we have, some areas it's a bigger deal than others, like you mentioned 20-acre farm or so that. I mean, you've got associations for places like settlement or portions of settlement, and the new place, the new places going in. Those are your biggest areas. You have small yards that you have this issue. So wouldn't that fall on associations for enforcement of that? And then if they can't control it, then they could come to the city or something like that? Because I just look at Pataskala is very diverse in the types of property. Where I live, there's all kinds of cars parked all over the place, and it's really none of anybody else's business what's there and what the status is of it. And it's also very heavily wooded. The woods is a bigger thing that needs to be addressed, of bad woods as opposed to cars being parked out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it's more of a, what's the overreach of coming onto somebody's property and deciding, you know, what's that threshold? If you have less than an acre, you can't do this, you know. I live on Woodside Drive,
Mhm.
there's campers parked in the front yard of one house,
Mm-hmm.
along with 8 different farm implements, and it's not a farm.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't look great, but it's kind of their business, because they can't get approval to change the property.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's, and I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. So they're not able to actually make the changes that they wanna make, because they can't get approval for it. So it's kind of a slippery slope as far as how I see it.
And typically what we can always do is start out slow, because I think it's easier to start out slow and expand as necessary. That if we find the majority of violations occur, or complaints, for example, or we see this happening mostly in situations like this, maybe we work to address that. And move forward through the process, because we can always change the code to make it more or less restrictive. I usually like to start slow and work to see if there is a problem, are we addressing the problem, did we overreach? Because we don't want to have it become, that's all we're doing is, you know, anybody parked on the grass.
And I mean, just for past experience, it's always a big overreach, because everybody's got their pet peeve
Mhm.
that they want taken care of. You know, that they can't stand because they saw it on the street that they live on. And, you know, so I don't have any problem with doing a small set, but I just don't see that usually happens. It usually snowballs. That's my concern.
And that's the thing, what we can do is if however planning commission wants to proceed, if you'd like to start that process, let me know if we get a consensus. I'll speak with Mr. Hicken and see if that's something that he wants us to pursue.
Little straw poll, I mean, do we want to ask Mr. Hickam if he wants to pursue it, or tackle other?
You know my vote.
I definitely know where Ann's, that's on me.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
mean, if you need time to drive around, take a look, see what you see, and, you know, if you think it's an issue or not, we can, you know, talk about it next month.
I
You know,
like that.
maybe
I
you
think
don't have
that's
to make
valid.
up your mind tonight, you can drive around if you don't already know it's a problem. I've brought it up, and maybe that will help you to be able to see if you think it's a problem or not. I personally think it's a problem, but, you know, I've lived here 20 years, so I don't know. You know, I mean, typically we travel the same route every day, and we don't really see what other people see all the
Right.
time. So, expand your horizons.
You have your nitpicks. No, I get it,
I
I get
think
it.
that's perfect too, especially because I was talking to Tim prior to this and he is underwater right now.
Right.
So I think to give us all an opportunity to drive around and see things really stick out, I think that's a great idea.
Yes. Okay.
Will
So
we,
June?
Yeah, we'll
June.
wait and come back on June and give you our,
And also, what was the other inoperable vehicles? Take a gander looking at that situation in our town, see if you think that's something we need to.
if you don't go
address
through the
now.
city, take
Yeah,
a drive around the city every once in a while, go do back roads.
right.
And just like what you're saying, take a drive around different housing developments and see what you see.
Absolutely.
what about campers and boats?
That'll be something we'll have to discuss and figure out. I mean, that's a gray area. I mean, if you ask me, I mean, if it's a seasonal thing, how do you,
Well, what I've noticed is campers parked on the street, then you have a delivery from a furniture company coming down the side, and they are parked opposite of, on the other side of the camper, and you can't get through because you got a camper on the street.
Wow.
I think that might fall under traffic too, and that would be a
Yeah.
police.
They should be able to go out.
Yeah,
and
cause
take
I've
it
seen
from
that happen where the police have gone out and said, you know,
Yeah.
that's kind of goes beyond us, then that's a
Okay.
safety
Yeah, that's-
issue.
That's police who would have no way to
Yeah.
enforce it from a zoning perspective.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to wrap my head around too, is can a lot of this be addressed through other regulations that already exist, or is there gaps in that maybe we're missing?
There are gaps. That's why we're,
There are gaps, and that's where, yeah, Ann's
that's
right.
why we're discussing it.
there are gaps. And I think just like Emily said, Mr. Hickham's got a large plate too, and he may nix it if we decide to, or he may say, absolutely, let's tackle it, you know. But I think it's a good idea, and let's drive around, look, and approach it in June.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, moving on to 7. Has everybody had a chance to read the minutes
Yes.
from March 4th? And if that's the case, I'll make a motion then. Go ahead.
Can I just have one tiny revision?
Absolutely.
Is that okay? It's on the second page. It says Ms. Butler noted interpreting the code. Can we change it to questioned?
Oh.
Sorry. Thank you. That's all.
That's all right.
That's all, sorry.
All right. With that change, is everybody okay with the approval of the minutes? If so, I'll make a motion that we approve March 4th, 2020 regular meeting minutes with the addition of Emily's change.
I'll second.
Roll.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Rogers,
Yes.
Mr. Breuering,
Abstain.
Ms. Butler,
Yes.
Mr. Truax,
Yes.
Mr. Baker.
Yes.
Moving on to number 8.
Oh,
Great.
okay.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn till June 3rd, 2020.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Riggero. Roll.
Mr. Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Truax,
Yes.
Ms. Butler,
Yes.
Mr. Breuering,
Yes.
Ms. Rogers, Mr. Davis.
Yes.